Good morning, happy Saturday, and welcome to Streams of Hope, streaming hope into your life this morning. My name's James, and I'm the lead pastor of Life Church Lincoln. It's a great pleasure to be here online with you this morning. It's great to be joined by people on both Facebook Live and on YouTube Live as well. If you are on Facebook, can I ask you just to think about putting the name of a friend of yours or one or two friends who you think might want to join the stream with us this morning? Please just tag them in. It'd be really great if they could join us. So this weekend, we've got a great weekend lined up. We had Good Friday yesterday, and tomorrow we celebrate Resurrection Sunday. We're trying to streamline our online services to make it easier for everyone to tune in and to make better use of your time. So Life Kids tomorrow will be taking place at the slightly later time of 10 a.m. Then from about 10:15 onwards, we'll have a time of worship together. And then at 11 o'clock, we will have a short message based around the wonder that is Resurrection Sunday. This morning, I'd just like to bring a really short but hopefully encouraging message to you. And I've called this message the waiting area. The waiting area. What do I mean by that? Well, often on Easter Saturday, I find that we have this temptation to fast forward to Resurrection Sunday. Sometimes if you go to church or on a Good Friday, or if you celebrate and remember the life and death of Jesus in the right way, in the way in which we should, we so often in our minds immediately jump forward right to Resurrection Sunday. But I want to ask us if this morning we could just take a moment to pause. We're in a place now in history where we look at a time that we could call the waiting area. What is the waiting area? I might hear you ask. What happens there? Well, I'll tell you, because you see that Jesus said during his earthly ministry, he said he would die. He said he'd be delivered into the hands of sinners. And he said that he would rise again. But by this point in the story, by the Saturday of the Easter story, if you jump right back in your minds to 2,000 years ago, we think back to the time when we were on that Saturday, that time in between the time when Jesus was crucified and then put in the grave and then rose again. We have a pause. We have a waiting moment that I'm this morning calling the waiting area. By this point in the story, Jesus was in the grave. As Christians, we often talk about the grave being empty. Hallelujah, the grave is empty. But at this point in the story, the grave had a person in it. Jesus Christ, dead and buried, wrapped in linen cloths. He told his disciples during his earthly ministry that they should believe in him and that he would die, but that he would rise again. But did they really believe him, I wonder? I wonder if you think about the people who were contained in the biblical accounts, the disciples, the Roman guards and the centurion around the tomb and around the cross as well when Jesus died, and the women who were gathered at Jesus' feet as he lay bleeding and dying on that cross. Imagine the position they were in now. I think we could call that place the waiting area, because they were in a place where they were waiting to see what was going to happen. I want to ask you, imagine yourself not being on Easter Saturday 2020, but all those hundreds and hundreds of years back, on that Saturday when Jesus was in the grave. If you can put yourself in the shoes of one of his disciples, or one of the Roman officials, or one of the women around the foot of the cross, what would be going through your mind right now? What would you be thinking? What would your emotions be like? I'd suggest to you that you were in something of a waiting area. You were waiting to see what was going to happen next. Would it be going through your mind that he was going to rise again, or would you have forgotten his words? Would it be going through your mind that all hope was lost. If you read back through the biblical accounts, you'll see the centurion says that Jesus surely must have been the Son of God at that moment that he breathed his last. The women around the cross were with him faithfully to the end. Joseph of Arimathea asked for his body to be taken down from the cross so that he could be buried in a freshly cut tomb. What was going through his mind? In one account it says that he had become a follower of Jesus in that time. Put yourself in the shoes of the disciples. It may be helpful to go and read through some of these gospel accounts in Matthew, Mark, Luke and John and see what they all say, because they all give slightly different accounts of the same event. Put yourself in the shoes of a disciple. Jesus had said that he was going to suffer and die alone. And he was right. His disciples, who claimed that they would go anywhere with him, they deserted him. Completely, literally left him for dead. We often think of Judas as deserting Jesus, but in reality, everybody deserted Jesus. All those disciples who said they'd do anything for him, they deserted Jesus as well. Judas went away and hanged himself, but it's likely that the other disciples, by this point in the story, this very real account, were in the depths of despair. They may even have been suicidal at the thought that they betrayed Jesus, that they'd abandoned him, that they just left him for dead. They said they'd give their lives for him, some of them, and yet where were they when they needed to? They abandoned him as Jesus was betrayed into the hands of sinners. What was going through their minds? What was going through the mind of the Roman centurion? Did we crucify the wrong man? Should we have done this? What was going through the minds of the women as they faithfully stayed by his side as he went and breathed his last? What was going through their minds on this Easter Saturday? What was life like that day? For me, I would imagine it was a completely dark day, a day of despair, a day when all hope seemed lost. I imagine I may be thinking to myself, well, this man Jesus said he was going to rise again, and yet where is he? He's gone. He's in that tomb over there. All hope has been lost. You see, we live with the knowledge of the resurrection, but these people didn't. If you think about it, we live with the benefit of history, whereas these people were living history. They were going through it. They were living it firsthand. Would Jesus really rise again? He's in a tomb. It's been sealed by a heavy stone. How can he come out of that? Even if they thought that Jesus would rise again, did they really believe it? Enough to keep hope going long enough through that day, which we could call the waiting area? Was the belief strong enough? Would it sustain them? What were their emotions like that day? I would imagine it would have been a very long day when time almost seemed to stand still. It seemed like all hope was lost. Put yourself in their shoes. What would they honestly have thought? What would you think if you were in the shoes of one of those characters? Maybe you could go to those accounts in the Gospels and say, well, if I was such and such a person, I think I might have thought this, or I think I may have thought exactly the same that they did. If you were in their shoes, would you have believed? Would you have believed that Jesus was really coming back? You would probably be broken and lost and upset as they were. This man who'd had this incredible 3.5-year ministry, suddenly gone, buried in that tomb. What would you think when you were in the waiting area, if you put yourself in those shoes. You might be the kind of person now who is waiting for God to break through, to change, to bring something different into a situation, to bring a turnaround, to bring something into the situation that only He can. And you may think to yourself, I don't know if God can come through for me. Just like those people were that day, we don't know if this man Jesus is really coming back. Today, let's think about this as we get ready for the great festival, the great party, the great moment we will celebrate tomorrow when we're here together, online together, and with many others, celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, the hinge of our entire faith. Let's just think and pause for a moment. Just as we paused for a while at the cross yesterday, we often use this phrase, the stations of the cross, or an hour at the cross. Can I encourage you today to pause at the waiting area and take the things that you're believing God for today, the things that where you may have thought to yourself, I don't know if God can come through for me on this, or I don't know if He will. Can I encourage you to pause and to think and to ask yourself the question, do I really trust? And Lord, will you renew my trust today? Because we do live on the other side of the story. The story is printed and written word to us. We know what tomorrow is going to bring, because tomorrow is going to bring the resurrection. But for now, let's stop and pause and ask ourselves some of those important questions. I'm just going to pray for you before we go. Father, thank you so much that we can take time to read your word and to pray to you and to, Lord, worship you and come before you both by ourselves or with others. And Lord, thank you that we can come and we can know and we can try to understand what life may have been like that day. I pray, Lord, you'll help every single one of us to understand it anew and afresh in this waiting area, Lord, where we waited for what turned out to be the greatest miracle ever. Help us, Lord, this year to have a new, fresh and different perspective on the whole story. I pray this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Amen. Thank you today for joining us on Streams of Hope. I really hope you can join us tomorrow on Facebook and on YouTube. It's just great to be together, even when it's just virtually or groups of people gathering in their homes and watching things online. So just as a brief reminder, Live Kids, 10 a.m, worship at 10:15, and a message at 11 o'clock. We're really looking forward to celebrating with you. Tomorrow is the most important day there is, when we celebrate the resurrection. So I encourage you, I implore you, please be online, please call your friends, tell them, come and spend a bit of time together as we celebrate the greatest day in history. God bless.